Can y'all hear me?
Yeah.
All right. So we're gonna give folk a little bit of time to get in, and feel free to share and like.
Y'all can still hear me, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get into 2020, Gill, and I didn't know that that AirPods connected to the MacBooks.
Listen, Apple connects to everything. You need to connect it to your Apple TV.
See, I ain't got an Apple TV, but
bro, that investment is to bless your life.
It'll bless you. It'll bless the ministry.
What? Yes.
I need to get that.
I think I'm gonna hang on with my team Android for a while longer.
Wow.
Wow.
I'm thankful.
Wow. Hey, go stop the call, man. Stop the call. We're getting off.
Will not achieve liberation with Android.
That's not what the Lord wants. It isn't.
That Apple got us into some problems, right? Based on some people's theological stance, that got us into some problems.
Indeed.
All right. All right. So I want to say good evening to everybody that is with us. I'm going to give folk just a little bit more time before we jump into some of these conversation points.
Okay.
Cool.
Hey, good evening, Cody. Good evening, sir. Cody, we're gonna have to get you in on these conversations as we talk about men's health, most definitely.
What's up, Gary?
Reverend Russell.
Right, Reverend Russell.
All right, we got about 30 people, so let's go ahead and just jump in. If we'll introduce ourselves, we'll start with you, Reverend Dr. Eric Gill.
First of all, Pastor Milton, I appreciate you considering me. for this essential and necessary conversation. I am, as you said, Reverend Dr. Eric Gill. I am pastor of operations at Metropolitan Baptist Church under leadership of Dr. Ray A. Owens. I am a husband and a father, and I just love God's people, all of them.
All right. Reverend Foster.
I want to reiterate Reverend Dr. Gill's gratitude for you considering me. And, you know, I have a lot of other gratitude I owe to Pastor Bowens for he kind of sat with me and talked to me, gave me some resources when I started teaching. I am a teacher at the oldest high school in the state of Oklahoma, Frederick Douglass High School. And I teach U.S. history there. I'm an associate minister at Progressive Baptist Church under the leadership of Reverend Larry Foster Sr. I am a husband as well and a father of two now, for 6 months now, two wonderful children. And I love my people, and I love all of God's people as well.
All right. I am Reverend Milton Bowens Jr. I'm the proud pastor of Shepherd Street Christian Church down I-44 in Chickasha, Oklahoma. I am an educator, been in education for now going on 11 years, taught at one of the other best high schools in Oklahoma, Northwest Classen High School.
We'll take that.
In Oklahoma City for 10 years. And now I currently work for the University of Oklahoma in the K-20 Education Center. Just going to share with you all how this came about. My congregation typically does this in a formal setting, men sitting together, and we pick a topic and we just talk about it because it's often said that men don't talk, men don't engage. And so to kind of break that wall down and break down that stigma that's attached to conversation, we have these conversations. We call it brothers at the table, because most of the time when you're at the table, whether you're eating, you're playing cards, or you're playing bones, whatever it might be, you engage in conversation, and it's authentic and it's real. And so now, since we are in this season of social distancing or physical distancing, I thought it would be beneficial to bring us together as men. And when the video of Ahmaud Arbery was released, that came with a flood of emotions for a lot of people. And I did a live video kind of at that moment about what my thoughts and feelings were about that. And just as I talked to other people, we saw that there was a lot of commentary, there was a lot of ideas, there was just a lot of frustration and not being able to articulate or have spaces to engage in conversation relating to being a Black man in the words of Otis Moss the third, these yet to be United States of America. Mm-hmm. And I felt that connecting with these two gentlemen and engaging in this conversation would help raise the level of conversation and bring us to a place where we could really tackle some of these issues. I don't think we're going to solve all the world's problems at this table, but I most definitely feel like through Dr. Gill and Reverend Foster and myself, I think we can really tackle some things and just get some conversations started that we hope that you all continue to have in your various spaces. So with that being said, so when the video was released of Ahmaud, what was the impact? Like, how did that impact you? What was your feelings about that when you saw the video, if you've seen it? Dr. Gill, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so the video was actually sent to me via direct messenger, and I initially didn't open it. I think I probably took 48 hours before I even went back and looked at the video. And to be honest, like, I didn't watch the video until I realized that there was a buzz around the situation. I think for my own self help and, protecting myself, when ever since 2014, 15, when at the height of, the Black Lives Matter movement, I felt like I was really, really engaged and jumping on everything. And so as I've gotten older and things of that nature, I've kind of sat back and let things come out before I make, my comment on things or even engage in them, just to protect my mental. But I will say that it was a revisit to some traumatic thoughts, and just from the time I spent in Ferguson, for the time I spent protesting in Baltimore. So to all of that stuff, like, it just brings back fresh memories of the hurt, of the pain, and it leaves me with a whole lot of questions, to say the least.
I think you muted, Pastor.
Reverend Foster.
Man, I think I had seen it on, seen people share it. I don't know if anybody sent it to me, but in my Facebook inbox, but I had seen it on people's walls on Facebook, and kind of the same sentiments as Dr. Gill. I had seen the article, whenever it came out weeks ago, but I had kind of intentionally been trying to guard my own spirit and protect myself. And I sometimes feel conviction about that. But at the same time, taking care of self is important. But I actually watched it by accident. It was sent to me in a text message. And I opened up the link and I was watching it, and I knew I'd recognize like the images of, some trucks, and it looked like a guy running. I was like, what am I watching? I think I was, I don't know what I was in the middle of doing, but I had stopped and I was like, what am I watching? And same as Dr. Gill, it takes me back. The part of when I resolved to start protecting my mental health with giving myself time before watching those videos was the Alton Sterling shooting. The first video I watched of that one, you didn't see it, or I couldn't see it, but I heard the shots, and I felt like my heart felt every shot that went off. And so it was a kind of similar feeling. And my heart dropped as Brother Ahmad fell as he was running off. And so it's a very traumatic experience, and each situation it's relatable beyond being Black, right? The situations are relatable because, I could have been in my home sitting on the couch eating ice cream, right? Or I could have been at the corner store doing something and run into an officer. I could have been jogging, right? Me and my wife, houses are being built. There's plenty of times when we walk into houses that are being built, and it's like, man, that could be me. Now, we live in a predominantly Black neighborhood, so I don't have that fear where I'm at or concern where I'm at, but I definitely it was a piercing reminder to be prayerful for all of my brothers all over America. So yeah.
Yeah, I would say that I had a similar reaction. I had kind of heard about the case. Well, there was no case, but I heard about the incident through some internet feed or thread back in March, and didn't really hear anything else about it. And then the video came, I wasn't sure what to expect. I didn't expect that, I'll be honest, because I do also try to guard myself a little bit, because I've learned how much I can take and what that does to me. But as I watched it, it did bring up all those emotions, from Trayvon to Philando Castile, Rice. All of those names just start flooding through my mind. And so when I seen that, now I live in a different area. It's diverse, but still a predominantly white part of Oklahoma. And I think about me and my wife had just went that day for a run, and just it kind of hit me, that just watching him being hunted down like that was really hard for me. And when we see these things, we're getting everybody's visceral reactions to it, and people popping off in their comments towards it. I'm just like, well, why didn't he stop? Why didn't? And it's just, it speaks to me about the level that even after all of this, this nation still does not get it.
Yeah,
exactly.
And that was a hard pill for me to swallow, given that context. But each of you kind of like already spoke to this, but when these things are happening and when we engage or when we have these racist experiences, I don't know about you guys, but I've had experiences like that where people have approached me with their racist language, actions, things, even at the gas station. I've been pulled over in a neighborhood, getting to my neighborhood before, and asked what am I doing here? All those different things, and it becomes a heavy burden. And so I think one of the questions we have is like, how do we process this? How do we cope with it without letting it just completely tear us down mentally?
Yeah. So I to go back to Reverend Foster's comment about him being a predominantly Black neighborhood and running. So I've been picking up this whole hobby of running, particularly since Auntie Rona showed up, right? And ain't nothing else to do. So if the sun is out, I'm going to either go walking with my wife or I'm going to go running. And so after I watched the video, actually it was on his birthday when everybody ran 2.23 miles. I used that time when I was running to not listen to any music, but just to reflect. And as I was running, I was thinking actually about my son. And I was thinking about how when we go walking, my son is received with such love and affection, it would appear to the white people in my predominantly white neighborhood and city that acknowledge you. So that's one piece, right? So some of us, we're walking and running and we'll make eye contact, give them the head nod, and they won't even acknowledge your existence. But to the ones who do acknowledge my son's existence, it's love, adoration. Oh, he is so cute and he's just so adorable. But as I was running, when my wife brought this up, that there was an argument with some neighbors and we could overhear the neighbors arguing. And one of the comments from the neighbors was, you N-word lover, right? And so in my mind, I'm running my 2.23 miles, thinking about Ahmad, and I'm sitting there thinking like, bro, like my son plays in that grass.
Yeah.
He's adorable now. When does he become a threat to the individuals who think that in a heated exchange with each other, a derogatory term to the next person is to call them an N-word lover? And so then I begin to think about the psychosis that is that to be able to say that to love somebody, regardless of who they are, is a derogatory term that I'm sending towards somebody. Like I'm insulting you by telling you that you love somebody. And that there's something that's psychologically wrong with that. And then you take another step back and you realize that the socio-historical makeup of this country lies in that psychosis, in that ideology of where it is a struggle, a strain, a tension to put yourself in a position to accept somebody else's truth and his or her humanity, whatever he or she says that humanity is, and however they explain it. And it blows my mind the more and more I pull back the layers. In one of our little Facebook groups, I think it was Pierre Keys talked about, what do we do with this and is there hope? And I mentioned Derek Bell and Derek Bell's notion of racial realism, like this notion that as much as I keep pulling back the layer of racism, and I get to a point to where I realize that racism is an integral part to the America that we live in, the good and the bad, right? Like some of the good of what makes this country is embedded in racism, and some of the bad of it is in the racism. And what do you do with that tension is what makes us go crazy.
Yeah.
Being Black in a neighborhood where people will not look at me when I'm running makes me go crazy. And at the same time, when you do look at me, you tell me that my son is adorable. And then at the same time, I hear you arguing, and the derogatory term you say somebody is that they're an N-word lover. And so, like, how do you not go crazy?
Right, right.
So you got to laugh to keep from crying.
Yeah, yeah. For me, man, it was deciding and allowing myself to grieve. I always ask myself, man. I shouldn't say I ask myself, but I always reflect on really, as a people, how none of us have even met Ahmad, right? But how deeply we feel, not just how it impacts us and how we think about how we interact with the world and in white spaces, but we feel deeply for his family, right? As if we knew him. Like it's a genuine sense. I don't go down my timeline and question anybody's sincerity when they are grieving the loss of one of our brothers or sisters. But for me, I find myself, and this is something I'm praying about. I need to be better at. I need to, but I find myself trying not to allow. You don't. I try not to allow my kids. My son is 6 months old, so he won't know the difference. But there are times when I try not to allow my daughter to see me grieving in that way, especially over something random. She loves her daddy. She'll probably start crying too, and I know what she's crying about. And I found myself kind of alone in the kitchen one day, and it just hit. I allowed myself to grieve for a few minutes. That for me, that was one. But as Dr. Gill said, understanding, as James Baldwin once said, to be Black and relatively conscious in America is to be what did he call it? Is to be in a rage, a constant rage. And so understanding that kind of helps you manage that rage when you understand the source of it and where it comes from. But for me, that first step was just allowing myself to grieve. And like Dr. Gill, we haven't gone out running because we have well, we do. We went on the day after Ahmad's birthday. We went on a neighborhood run / walk. Me and my wife, we get up and we work out. We have a few pieces of equipment here. And we get up and we work out. And so I've just kind of been losing myself in that, in a sense.
It's, I think the important thing that we bring from this is that we have to let ourselves feel. That we got to give ourselves permission and space to feel, because so often, we have to try to, because us being, men in our families, we have children. I know that my children, I have a 13-year-old, a 5-year-old, and a 4-year-old, and they can tell, they can sense my energy. And so as I watched that video, I just went into my garage and just kind of fiddled around with things for a while and just thinking, and then begin just talking out loud about just asking questions, almost like a conversation between me and God, and processing that way. But then having to realize my life still moves. And so now I have to still interact with people who do hold these views, who look at me the same way that they probably looked at Ahmad. And that's why I said in my post that it's like growing up, you think, you always hear people talk about the way that sometimes that we dress and we act and we talk and all of that stuff. And so once you come to the realization, I try to teach this to my students that no matter how educated I am, no matter how many degrees I get, no matter how many 3-piece suits I wear, when some people see me, all they're going to see is my Blackness, and they're going to automatically see that as a threat to their person or to their space, and there's nothing that I can do about that. And I think giving ourselves permission to just acknowledge those truths and having space to just wrestle with it, I think is healthy for us.
It is. Conversations like this, I think, are healthy. Both being able to engage in conversations like this, and even if I've been able to sit in on some live videos on Facebook, listening to conversations like this, it helps. It helps. It helps that process.
All right. Because all three of us are fathers. All of us are fathers of boys. Dr. Gill, you have one son, correct?
Yes, sir.
And I have one son and two daughters. And Reverend Foster, you have a daughter and a son.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing and going through our own experiences, how does that impact the way that we father our children?
Yeah. So, it's funny. My pastor jokes with me all the time about how he was the progressive and hip youth pastor, but all that changes when it's your kids, right? So
Yeah.
I did my doctoral work on making Black youth aware of their Blackness and social consciousness and all that kind of stuff like that. Spent hours reading books and studying in the library, doing that work, and know the importance of it. But I find myself now with a 3-year-old trying my hardest to protect him from seeing any of these hurts and pains. The things that I was trying to introduce my youth to, like, I find myself protecting my son from, right? If it is his haircut, small things like that. It's almost a form of upliftsuasion, right? What Ibram X. Kendi in his book, Stamped from the Beginning, articulated this notion that, I'm trying to protect you so by helping you appease whiteness in whatever way, shape, or form that I can do that, until reality slaps you in the face. And now we have to have a tough conversation. And even though my research would suggest that you should not do that, I can't help but, parentally, like, try to inculcate my son in this bubble of happiness until, I have to have this conversation with him. Now, granted, I'm lucky because he's only 3 and he probably can't comprehend none of this stuff anyway, but I am convicted, and I worry about my capacity to have these tough conversations with my own seed and seeing the hurt in him when I have to explain, I know you learned about, Christopher Columbus, but let's have another conversation.
Yeah.
I know you want to play with this young kid, but let's have another conversation, right? So I think it's a tug of war, man, and I earnestly pray and ask God for strength to be able to make sound decisions when it comes to him. Like, I really am stay up literally at night worrying about it.
Man, similar to Dr. Gill, Gabriella's 7. She may have been 3 or 4, man, and we're driving home from church, and she sees some police lights. They have someone pulled over, and we have tried, like Dr. Gill said, you try to inculcate them and protect them from these conversations, these realities, and it could be that she heard it. I don't know where she would have heard it, but she said, "Daddy, there's the police." And I said, "Yeah, they got somebody pulled over." And she said, "I hope they don't kill us."
Wow.
And I just froze.
See,
I froze.
See,
I froze, right? And you feel, it's like, and I did have a brief conversation with her and said, I don't know if she remembered where she heard it, or she just didn't want to, she could sense something was wrong and didn't want to say it. But, you have to have a conversation with her and explain to her that's not going to be the experience every time. But I couldn't go into a deep conversation with her. She's a 4-year-old, right? And so embarking on having a son, this concern just became real heavy for me. It's like, man, I remember at our gender reveal, man, I ran a lap around the pool. A friend of mine said, man, if it's a boy, you got to run a lap. And I said, all right, I got you. So, I started running a lap around the pool. I was excited. It was all these emotions. My wife was excited. She wanted a boy. My mother-in-law, chased me as well. She, we were all excited. But shortly after it set in, it's like, man, I'm going to have to raise a Black boy to a young man, to an adult male. And I started to have anxiety, all over, man. And I think one thing that helped me in that moment is, y'all know, Pastor Kruder, he was here, and Reed, Trey, musician, he was here. And so we were singing gospel music. And so honestly, that kind of helped me in that moment to cope with that anxiety and that feeling of grief. But I'm like Gill, I'm concerned about, I'm really concerned and prayerful about my ability to have these conversations. I've already been concerned about it with my daughter. And we have some age appropriate discussions about it. I haven't used that R word, right, with racism. You at that age, you try to use words like mean. Some people don't like you for reasons you can't control, or because of what you look like, because of the color of your skin. And to try to have those conversations without instilling a sense of bitterness in a child it's unfair that we have to have these conversations, but it's our reality, right? Because I don't want, I always follow the conversations of, Gabrielle, you can't hate everybody that looks like that. You just have to be able to know when somebody feels a particular way about you, and you have to know how to carry yourself in light of that. And so, yeah, I hate that we have to have those conversations, but I'm always prayerful about it too. I've wanted, for a while, I need to go ahead and break down and do it, but to talk to my own dad, it's beyond time to talk to my own father about, how did you cope with it? I know you experienced racism. I've heard your stories, right? I've heard some of them. I know I haven't heard all of them, but how did you deal with it? How did you cope? How did you make it through it? And I think that is, Dr. Gill, this is a phrase that I've borrowed from him and ran off on the plug twice. But the intersection of youth and wisdom, I think that's a big part of it, is talking to our elders about how they brought us up. How did you, as a parent, I was there with you, but how did you cope with, when I experienced racism at this point? How did you feel when me and my brother came home and told you about this experience we had? And I think that's a necessary conversation for myself. So there's something, now that it's out there for the public, I got to go ahead and do it.
Yeah. I would say that my experience is very similar to both of you. My oldest is 13. And so my wife and I have wrestled over the years about how much I talk to her about things and what things I engage in conversation with her from when she was younger up until now. And it's rough because when we first moved to where we are, we're in Moore, Oklahoma. So y'all can kind of read that into that, what you want to read into it. And putting her into a school where we were just talking about it yesterday, when she was in her elementary school, she was one of 10 Black kids in that school. And so when it came to behavior and things like that, I felt like you said, Dr. Gill, like this idea of like having to almost try to appease whiteness, making sure that, that she doesn't fall into any of the stereotypes that they might have for her, making sure that, that she performs better, and also wrestling with that weight of, you got to be better than the rest. You can't do what they do, right? You can't pop off at the mouth like they do, not wanting her to be labeled as that Black kid in the school. And that's always hard. And now, as I have 2 more young ones entering into public schools, I wrestle with the same thing. My daughter, You know, I think I will agree with you, Dr. Gill. I am very in the classroom, very upfront about racism and all the isms actually, and just speaking truth to my students, because I taught high schools, sophomores, juniors, and seniors. So we would have these real conversations about what they're experiencing, what's happening in their community, what's going on around the world. When Trayvon Martin was murdered, we had to like press pause on our content, because I taught history, to really deal with what was happening in the now. And then when I come home and I talk to my daughter, I always find like, okay, how much do I talk to her about this? What do we let her see? I don't want her to be shielded to the point where it like shatters her world when she does experience this. The first time anyone ever called me the N word was second grade. I remember where I was sitting in the classroom, and they didn't say it directly to me, but they were in a group of friends and they said, "Milton's this." And I didn't have any words to articulate what that was doing to me at that moment. I was mad. I was sad. These kids who were supposed to be my classmates and friends say this. And I just knew I didn't want that for my daughter. And so I had to like almost like constantly engage with her with these conversations about, right, they can do that, you can't, right? Make sure that when she would go with their friends to different places. I remember that there was a mother who took the girls somewhere and they were going into stores and stuff. And I had to tell my daughter, you can't be touching everything. You can't go around like they are picking up stuff and touching. And just trying to help her understand what's happening around her. Now that I have a son, it's the same, but it's also different in a way, because when he gets upset or like mad about something at school or daycare that he's in now, or preschool, whatever you want to call it, those same thoughts are coming. I don't want him being labeled as the angry black boy or the discipline problem, because being in education for as long as I have been, I know what happens to those kids that get those labels put on them. I taught those kids. They were some of my best students, but they had been labeled from early on. And then that became almost a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like it almost like they kind of walked into that. And so it's just hard, being a father and then trying to process stuff yourself and help your children understand it and not knowing when to have those conversations. But do you all remember when your parents had that conversation with you? Maybe about driving or interacting with the police, or just how to deal with racism?
I can't remember the conversation directly, but again, for the majority of my life, I lived in a athletic bubble. Me and my college teammates talk about it now on our little video chat, the polo, right? We talk about how we missed out on anti-Blackness because we were able to perform, right? So I just looked through my high school and middle school yearbooks, and in middle school was not one Black person on faculty. In high school, there was only one Black science teacher. And so the majority of my scholastic career, I was the only Black kid in class all the time. But there was a contingency of us. I think in my graduating class, it was like 560 something of us, but there's only 33 Black people. If racism existed, it was the microaggression type racisms, where Eric, you can only be an athlete. Don't take AP classes. Or some of the, directly overt ones was my history teacher, who allowed me to do wall sits. I kid you not, wall sits to get a grade in the class. He said, I've never seen anybody do wall sits for 5 minutes. I sat on the wall for 6 minutes, got a B in the class, and went to the gym every day to shoot shots. And that was my history class. My English teacher let me sleep in class. And so like, these are things. And so then I get to college, and my first paper, the professor writes, this isn't graduate level work, right? Because I never paid attention in English class, right? So those are small things. So for the most part, like I was in a bubble and wouldn't even know to acknowledge those things. So I'm acknowledging these things in the past tense. In the present, I wouldn't even known to go to my parents and have those type of discussions centered around racism, because I was beloved because I was an athlete. There's a protective bubble around athletes. At least then. There's not now. They want them to shut up and dribble, but then. So I never had those type of conversations with my parents. Oh, I can't remember. How about that?
Yeah, so for me, I can't remember specifically. My first experience that I can remember with racism, I think I was in the fourth. It was a summer before my fifth grade year, before my brother's senior year in high school, and my parents had a 1985 Toyota Cressida that they had passed down to my brother. The AC did not work. It's the summertime, and we are going downtown to meet Mama for lunch. No cell phones, and so we called Mama before we left. Yeah, y'all go ahead and come down. We get downtown, and she's taking a while to come down. We don't have a cell phone to call her. She just said, y'all wait outside, I'll be down there. My mom works for the United States Attorney's Office. She's the Assistant United States Attorney, then Judge. Actually, I'm sorry, no. She was the United States Attorney, the interim United States Attorney at the time. And it's hot. The AC doesn't work. So we had enough of sitting there with the windows down. We get out and sit on a planter where there's a tree at. And I think I had on like some shorts. My brother either had just worked out or was going to go work out. He was a football player doing his summer workouts. And we're sitting there, and he finally, after sitting there for a long time, he just said, hey, something must have happened. She must have, something came up, some kind of meeting came up. So we go to get in the car. He said, we'll just go home. He said, we'll call her when we get home. We get in the car. Well, before we get in the car, we grab the handle, and a white lady in the vehicle behind us yells something. I didn't hear what she yelled. And I just looked, and my brother said, get in the car. So I get in the car, he said, don't worry about it, get in the car, I'll go talk to her. I honestly, that young, I didn't think it was anything malicious. I thought maybe she recognized us because we would see a lot of my mom's coworkers. She would bring us up to the office, and so they knew us. But this woman said, my brother got in the car, and it took him a while before he could tell me what she said. I said, what does she want? And he said, he drove for a while, and what he ended up telling me was, matter of fact, I don't know if he told me more than I overheard him telling Mama when we got home over the phone, that she called him back there and said, you guys better not dare think about stealing that car. This building is full of federal employees, federal law enforcement agents, and you will not make it out of downtown if you try to steal this car. He said, ma'am, this is my car. We sat outside because the AC doesn't work and we were hot. He said, we were here to meet my mother for lunch. And I don't remember if he told her what our mother's position was, but the next day, my mother said that one of her coworkers, one of her fellow attorneys came in tears, a male. He came in crying tears, apologizing to her for the actions of his wife. That was his wife that acted that way towards us or assumed those things about us. That was my first introduction. Now, my educational experience, first grade, I did my kindergarten curriculum, I guess you would say, in pre-K over at, why can't I think of the actual daycare's name, but it was a daycare attached to Emmanuel Baptist Church over on Kelly. Went to Corpus Christi for first grade, which was a Black school. The school was predominantly, the students were Black. And our principal was a Black man. Second grade, when my brother was going to high school, I wanted to go to a school that my parents went to as well. And when I was that age, I was persistent about the things that I wanted. So my parents, my dad's elementary school was no longer open. So Edwards Elementary School was open. And so I went to Edwards Elementary School. My first time going into a non-Black setting for education was sixth grade at Westminster Middle School. and I was one of 5 or 6 Black students in the whole school, whole middle school. It's a small middle school, but it's like 5 or 6 of us total. And me and another fellow Black student were talking. We both played basketball. And Senator E. Melvin Porter's grandson, actually. We're talking after school one day, and a guy walks by. We were friends with his sister. She's in our grade, and we thought we were friends with him, but he walks by and says the N-word. And in my mind, I thought, again, because I've never experienced anything like this. In my mind, I thought that's not what he said. And we both looked at each other and kept talking. And when we kept talking, I assumed, okay, that's surely not what he said, because Victor thought the same thing. Until I'm in my room chilling later on, and my mom yells in anger at my name from the front of the house. And I was like, what did I do? I go to the front, and she's angry because I didn't tell her that somebody called me the N-word at school. And I told her I just assumed he didn't say it. And I assumed we both thought that because we didn't even address it. We just kind of looked at each other and kept talking. Beyond that, again, a similar experience as Gill. I went to Douglas, all Black high school, not all Black, but 95 to 99% Black. Went to a Black high school, a lot of Black teachers around. And my senior year, my AP government teacher, I experienced something with him that I'd never experienced. And I had a white female English teacher, honors English teacher in 11th grade, white female AP US history teacher in 11th grade. And so when I get to 12th grade and this teacher is a white male, he would let me sleep through class. And I wasn't used to that. I would get tired in class, but I had teachers that just wouldn't let it happen. My AP US history teacher was a small lady, and she would walk by and clap, get up, DeAndre, get up, wake up, go get some water on your eyes or something. And I didn't realize how much I appreciated it until I didn't have it. And I get to the AP test, I'm like, I don't know any of them. I slept through class. And the worst thing about it is he would let me sleep. And then when I wake up, he would want to talk sports because I played football, I played basketball. And I'm like, why didn't you wake me up to talk about history, like about government? Like I need to be, wake me up. So it was that type of thing. And in college, we weren't secured by a bubble of athleticism. At Southwestern College, Winfield, Kansas. I love my alma mater, met my wife there. Wouldn't change my experience for the world. But we had dear teammates of ours that, this was a shock to me because, you can probably relate. You play sports with somebody, you shed blood, sweat, and tears with these guys on the field, on the court. Those are your brothers. I don't care, you white, Black, Mexican, you my brother, right? We fighting the same fight on this field. We've been through the same tour-a-days, the same summer workouts. You're my brother. And so on a few different occasions, we had parties on camp or off campus where one of our teammates would call one of the Black basketball players the N-word. And so, of course, all of the Black football players are on the side with the basketball players, right? And there's this big issue that's almost a big brawl / riot. Or the time when they threw a party and you had to have a swastika drawn on your hand to enter. Wow. And we had those conflicting conversations with a Black teammate of ours. Man, what are you doing inside of this party? And in his defense, he didn't understand it, right? I don't know what his educational history was or what he had experienced as far as racism, but he didn't understand what a swastika was. He was in there having a good time. And we were like, hey, come here, man. Why are you in here? He was like, oh. And when he understood, he was offended as well. But and so it was different. I always tell people Southwestern could have been viral if social media was as big as it is now. So we didn't have that. I don't know if you call it a blessing, but a blessing of being in a bubble of athleticism. There, there was a lot of tension there at times.
Can I speak, Pastor Milton, real quick? Something Foster said. So I think both me and him brought up this notion that while we were going through, we didn't recognize or understand the totality of the situation. And so it's been once we've gotten older that we can look back and reflect on it and say that, this was wrong, or this was racism. Like, I didn't know what exactly the name of it was, but I know what racism is. But I think that speaks to this other notion that I've been wrestling with, is the trauma of unlearning and the shifting of a narrative, right? So like when we're growing up, we're understanding what life is as it pertains to this narrative, right? Go to Sunday school, God is love, he got the whole world in his hands, right? My son just seen let your light shine all over the Facebook, right? And like to let him know that it does not matter how bright your light shines. At times, and there might be a time when someone does not see your light, but they see your darkness, and that's the darkness of your skin, right? So like wrestling with this reality and unlearning things that you thought were normative, and now constructing a new reality in that causes trauma, right? And so we talk about what it means to process the killings that have been taking place, Auntie Rona, or even our own lived experience. I think a whole lot of it is centered around this notion that I have to relearn some things. And so that's not only time consuming, but now it makes me question the very people who taught me these things. Like, did you love me?
Exactly.
Did you care about me? Like what were your intentions when you taught me this? Or when you didn't tell me this? Like, did you really care about who I was as a total person in the midst of all these things? Or is it like what we talked about and lamented earlier, like, I was just trying to protect you, baby? You know what I mean?
Right.
And that being the truth, like, I will be honest with you. When I went to I came back from seminary, like I was mad, at my Sunday school teacher. I was mad at my pastors. I was mad at my mom and daddy. Why y'all ain't teach me none of this stuff? But now I have a son and I understand, like, I want to protect you, right? Like, I just want to keep you in as happy and as joyful a place, because when you hurt, I hurt. And there might have been times when the parent or the parent wanted to say something and he or she went back and cried in a corner.
Say that.
Right. And you didn't even know that they were crying for what you experienced, but they didn't have the words and the vernacular to speak to it. And so they just let it pass by. And so like when we talk about all this stuff, like this processing, that there are so many layers and there's so many variables that are at play, that like it is, again, would cause a normal person to go crazy. But Blackness, being Black, male and female, means to walk in the craziness and try to keep your sanity.
Exactly. And that's real. What you were saying about being in athleticism and all that, when I go back and look and try to unlearn and ask those questions about why did you do what you do or didn't do, I remember having a teacher that said, Milton, don't act like them. You're one of the good ones. Don't act like that one. And at the moment, I just kind of just taking it as don't misbehave like some of my friends were, but realizing that, saying that I was the good little, and wrestling with that now and how people treated me, or even, we were all professionals, we're all educated, and you get you're so well spoken, or I'm just shocked at how you articulated that, right? As if their expectations of me when they see me is for me to be cooning or something. I don't know. But I think I would be just downright disrespectful to have you two great minds here. And we're going to have to do this again at some point. We're going to most definitely have to do this again. There's a lot to unfold and unpack with this. But everybody's loving your shirt, Dr. Gill. So let's go ahead and talk about it. All three of us have been labeled as social justice preachers or liberation preachers. I'm going to give you all the space in the few minutes we have left to kind of articulate the need for that prophetic preaching in this time.
Yeah, this is going to be real simple and sweet with me. I preach Bible, right?
Yes.
So I think it was our good brother Daryl Hamilton who had a quote from Desmond Tutu just a couple of days ago,
right?
Who said that, like, there's no such thing as social justice, right? Like, it's like justice or the good news to the poor is bread. The good news to somebody who is unlawfully incarcerated is freedom. Someone who has been incarcerated and does not have the human rights given to any person of humanity just because they committed a crime and or made a bad decision, but they did their time and now they cannot vote. Their good news is restorative justice, right? To be able to vote for Ahmad and his family. I'm wrestling with what the good news is, right? Like, what's the good news? Like, do you take away the killer's lives? That don't bring Ahmad's life back, right? So, and it, stands in tension with my hermeneutic, right? And my theological approach to the text and to who I believe God is too. So, I know we facetiously get in these groups and we on live now, and so people can have a little insight into my mind. But I am comfortable with what I know and who I believe God to be, and I preach Bible, and my hermeneutic of Jesus has nothing to do with justice. This is what I believe, who I believe Jesus is, and who God called Jesus to be.
Amen.
All right.
Man, similar, man. I've had, conversations with good friends, people I consider friends in ministry, who will, if we're in, I know Gill says he hates doing like 7 last words or New Year's Eve, watch night sermonettes because, and so I'll have preachers that I consider friends will get up and say, Reverend Foster, I don't have a social justice sermon. I don't have a social, I just, all I got is the gospel. And, I've heard the, Foster's a social justice preacher. And I take it as an honor. One of the people, one of the pastors that I look up to the most, Dr. J. Alfred Smith, out in Oakland, California. He always tells me, you in the right lane. And so I value that. So I don't take offense to that. But when that was said, I just have the gospel. Like, man, that's what I got.
Right.
Like Gill said, I'm preaching the Bible. We preaching the Bible. And so it's who I believe God to be. It's the way God has revealed God's self to me, and who Jesus has revealed himself to be in my life. And we talk about processing. One of the questions you asked earlier, these are some of the ways that as Black people we have to process. I believe I don't want to put that mandate on everybody but for me, this is one of the ways that I have to process is finding hope in an unarmed Black man, right? Who was crucified. And I won't go into, I'll let Dr. Pierre Keys jump in the comments and give us that breakdown of crucifixion in the Roman Empire and what it meant. But Jesus was that unarmed Black man, and the fact that I won't let my Baptist come out, but it was early on a Sunday morning. It was early on a Sunday morning. He got up and he overcame that threat of death. And for me, one of the central things, yes, that was the ultimate protest and defiance. And to me, that's one of the central things to liberation, a fight for justice and equality, equity, equitable living, is the threat of death. Even in Black Panther, I don't want to get the name wrong, the brother that sold the vibranium to the other guy, he said all of their heroes are killed, right? All of our, we got Dr. King, Malcolm X, our heroes that really press in a persistent way are killed, right? And so you look back at Jesus, that's who they killed, was the insurrectionists, those people who would try to fight for freedom from the Roman Empire. That's who would be crucified. And for Jesus to overcome that on the cross, and we still call on the name of Jesus 2,000 years later, for me, that means that threat of death does not exist for me, does not have to exist for me, right? You killed Jesus, you didn't kill his spirit, right?
Where's my
I have
organ?
access to
where's the Hammond B3?
Yeah. Right, tune me up.
Put my man's at E flat, man. Let's go.
I got access to his father, right? So my spirit won't be killed, right?
Yeah.
And we have to wrestle with the tension of what that means. Is, you hear some of Dr. King's sermons, and he talks about wanting to live a long life and understanding the value of long life, but you also have that threat of death knocking at your front door. And it becomes an even more faithful walk with God, because you trust God all the more to say, whatever happens, wherever God leads me, all me and the people that I care about, God has taken care of. There's, if I'm gone tomorrow, God is going to take care of my wife and my children. You understand? So, but yeah, that's it. I didn't talk too much, man.
No.
Turn the organ off.
Somebody get the ushers. I need a cheat. But I want to thank both of you, Reverend Dr. Eric Gill, Reverend DeAndre Fossman. Thank you, brothers. We most definitely need to get back together and do this again. I think there's a litany of topics and things that we need to bring some voice to. I appreciate you, brothers. Keep on doing what God has called you to do in being, and blessings to you and your family. And thank you to those who joined us on Facebook Live. Continue to share and rewatch. And if there's some topics or some things that you all would like for us to talk about, I'm gonna hold these brothers to it. Just send them to us and we'll see what we can do around some of those topics. Absolutely. Or those ideas.
Absolutely.
God bless.
Thank you, man.
And God keep.
Thank you for the opportunity, man.
Most definitely. Thank you, brothers.
All right.
Bless you.
Later.